Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Gibbons, and I am here today with Tami Reis-Frankfort, and she is one of the incredible authors of Phonic Books, the team of teachers to create decodable text, and they are incredible. And Tammy today is going to be talking about the benefits of decodable text and using them with your students and how to help them make progress using those books. And Tammy, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. You want to share a little bit about yourself?
Okay, well, hi everybody. I'm sitting in my office in London, England. Very interested in what's going on in the States at the moment. And yes, I've come from mainstream teaching. I came late to teaching, but started off teaching in a mainstream classroom in a public school in London, which had a very diverse community. And I'm one of those teachers who really noticed very soon on that I wasn't able to help the kids who were struggling with reading. I really had no idea because my teacher preparation course hadn't really prepared me. And so it was only later on when I had my own son and he was struggling with reading that I started to look into this further and did um, a qualification in dyslexia, in specific learning difficulties, and then in phonographics, which is linguistic phonics programs, and then in sounds right. But it was only when I did these qualifications that I actually learned about structured literacy. And it was a complete aha moment for me that structured literacy was the answer for kids who were struggling. So fast forward some years, and I ended up working in a little charity, an intervention center, dyslexia center in London. And we were getting these kids who had already failed to learn to read. And we were looking for reading resources that would help, that would go alongside of our structured literacy. And we found often that the materials weren't engaging enough, or they moved too fast, or they were too babyish, because the kids would sometimes come at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, and they wouldn't want to read the very young looking books which were structured. So long and the short of it is we set about publishing them ourselves with the community of kids that we were teaching in mind. We wanted books that they would want to read. We wanted to create books that provided the structure for the teacher and the practice for the student. So the gaps would be filled as they went step by step. And that's how we started with Phonic Books. And now we have a range for beginner readers and a range for what we call catch-up readers, or basically for struggling readers who are older. All the books you're going to see today are an American edition because, of course, English spelling is a little bit different. You say tomato, we say tomato. So all our books are actually in American editions. So they've all gone through an American proofreader, and American proofing, American publishing process. That's what I'm going to talk about today, how Decodable books can support your phonics teaching, your structured literacy program. So shall we
I'm so
start?
excited. Yes, Tammy, it's so funny. We have so many connections with the way you got started and struggling to know how to reach the students in your class. And it just feels like our stories are so parallel. And when I was listening to them, like, oh gosh, I felt the same way.
I think often what you find is that
Yeah.
often a lot of people who are involved in reading intervention or dyslexia might have someone in their family, like their own child, or somebody they know very well, that kind of was a catalyst to find out what is going on here. Why is my child struggling?
Right.
What should I be doing?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay, we're ready to get started. Oh,
okay, so I'm now going to look at my presentation, my slideshow, and here we go. So is that okay? Can you see that?
I can't see it just
Okay,
yet.
let me just make sure I've got share my screen.
Okay. There we
That's
go.
good.
I think
Okay,
it's coming up now. Here we are.
okay.
Okay.
So
Wonderful.
I shall I start, Emily?
Absolutely. Okay,
Okay.
so Tammy is going to go through and we'll be discussing all of the ins and outs of decodable text, decodable books, and how they'll benefit your students. Okay, Tami.
So, as Emily said, I'm going to talk about how Decodable Books will support your phonics teaching, your program, and also with your older students, how it will re-engage your older students who might be disengaged from reading because they've just failed and don't feel that reading is for them. But
That's
let's
so
start at the
important.
beginning
Mhm.
and just ask the question. I'm just going to start this slideshow from the beginning. Is that working? Yeah. What
Okay.
are decodable books? So decodable books are they're controlled text, and they need to be controlled because what we want to do is we want to expose beginner or struggling readers to text that they can use the phonics they've been taught to successfully decode words. And those words should have the phonics that they've been taught. So we say that it's a bit like teaching math. When you teach addition, you want to give the children exercises in addition. You don't want them to be doing multiplication because you haven't taught them multiplication. Therefore,
Right.
you want to control the material that you're giving them to practice their skills on.
Mhm.
This is something very simple, but actually often that's not what happens in reality, that even though some teachers teach the phonics, they often give their kids materials to read that they cannot use their phonics with. And so they're fundamentally expecting them to do multiplication when they've only taught them addition. So,
Right.
whoops. So when you teach kids how to decode certain spellings, the decodable books are practice for reading those spellings within a text. And so a lot of people have criticized decodable books that the language is very limited, they dumb down, but that's the wrong way to see them. This is basically an exercise. It's a practice. We're not trying to compete with the beautifully illustrated books with wonderful themes, enriching language, experiences. This is not what we do. We are just getting kids to practice the phonics within text. So the
Right.
next thing we need to think about is, where do decodable books fit within the whole framework of theory of reading? And we know that the best theory we have right now is the simple view of reading, which has two strands, two main strands. One is kids need oral language before they start to read. They need oral language because once they are able to decode, they need to comprehend the words they're able to decode. And these two
Mhm.
strands have equal importance. That exactly is what the oral language times decoding equals reading comprehension actually means. It's no good if you can decode but don't have oral language, and it's no good if you have oral language but you can't decode. Neither of them will produce a fluent, confident reader. When kids start to read, of course, most kids have some oral language because they speak English. And if they don't, of course, that's what the teacher will also have to develop their language if they're English language learners. But most kids will be focusing on the decoding bit because that is something that's totally new to them. While oral language will come naturally to them from just being at home and baking with mommy and going on trips and in the park. The decoding bit is the bit which is not natural, and most kids will need instruction and structured instruction in it. So the decodable books are actually part of the decoding side of this formula, and they should be used only for a limited time. We use decodable books only for that time that children are learning to decode. And while they're doing that, at the same time, teachers and parents need to be enriching their language uh, as they learn to decode. So when they come to be able to decode, they can comprehend more and more complex words and more rich texts within the
Yes.
curriculum, non-fiction, fiction, all the wonderful literature that we have in the curriculum. So what we wanted really to explain is decodable text is that just that little square 2B, that is where its place is. But of course, as we said earlier, decodable books are like training wheels on a bike.
Mhm.
And so, and not all children learn to ride in the same way. There are those who get it really quickly, have very good sense of balance, and those who take a bit longer and take a fall or two before they actually get their balance and can go off. But they're only intended for a limited time. They're not intended to be used for very long. And once the training wheels come off, and the balance is established, the rider will take off. And that is what decodable books are supposed to do for reading.
Yes, I really love the way you explain that using the bike with the training wheels. Absolutely.
So the next question we have is, well, how long should the student have those training wheels? How long do we need those training wheels until we take them off? When do we know that they're ready? And
that is a question I hear a lot.
Well, it's a difficult question because we know, although children all have to learn in the same progression, they don't all learn at the same rate. And some children find it harder than others. So in fact, this is a little bit of a kind of how long is a piece of string, because you need to observe your students. As students progress through a phonics program, they need to have quite a large part of the alphabetic code to be confident readers. That means covering the long vowels. It also means covering some of the unusual consonants like PH and GH, which are quite difficult to figure out yourself. You might also want to teach them the soft and the hard C, or the soft and the hard G, because these are difficult things in our language. So I think you should definitely have those covered before you go on to authentic text. The other thing is that once students have sufficient knowledge of the alphabetic code and they're not fazed by actually working out new words, that's when they're ready for authentic text. So when you give them a new word and they're trying to work it out and they get it right quite a lot of the times, then they're ready to try and figure out reading beyond the controlled environment of a controlled text. So if a student reverts to guessing when reading an authentic text, that means they're not confident enough or don't have enough phonic code knowledge or skills to try and work out a new word. And
that is such an important point. If they've reverted back to guessing, they just are not ready yet.
Exactly.
They haven't internalized those decoding strategies or those concepts yet.
Exactly. And so I think as teachers, I would think that some kids probably might start to get ready at the end of grade 1 or grade 2 to be able to read books, but others might need to hang on a little bit longer until they are quite confident in good strategies, good habits of working out new words.
Absolutely.
There was recently an interesting article about this I wanted to mention if anybody's interested in reading about this. There's a really good blog called The Reading Ape.
Excellent.
And there's one specifically recently about controlling the text, the dilemma of decodable text. When do you actually stop controlling the reading of the children and let them fly? And I've got the details of that blog post if anybody's interested in reading more about this.
Great.
So there's another thing I wanted to mention about decodable books, which has come to me recently, is that I've recently learned about Scher's self-teaching hypothesis. And this is a hypothesis which basically explains how it is that kids know lots of words that we haven't taught them to read. Because we haven't taught them every single word they know how to read. And his hypothesis fundamentally means that if they learn to map the words orthographically, if they learn to map the sound spelling, they're very likely to use that knowledge and to trial it on new words they encounter. And so my theory, my assumption is that decodable books will reinforce the mapping, because what you're doing is you're giving them lots of words with a certain specific sound, spelling, correspondence. They can practice their mapping within this controlled environment. And because they do it again and again and again, then once they go and read other texts, they can use this mapping with words with the same spellings they've seen before. So here you see, for example, the word house, and you can see how many words about, round, cloud, hound, the children can figure out from themselves without being taught directly, once they've remembered the OU spelling for the sound owl. And the same is with the SE at the end of the word, that basically the E is silent, and they can see it in house, and then they'll see it in other words and make that connection. So I think that decodable books also have a part in this self-teaching hypothesis, because we're all about reinforcing mapping of words.
Right.
Okay.
And a child who can efficiently map words, we know that whole reading circuit that's going on in their brain on that left side is really strengthening and firing away quickly and efficiently. So yes,
That's
I
right.
think that's an important distinction, because your point at the beginning is learning a word by shape is inefficient versus learning how to map really is the way the brain is working to read.
Exactly. Exactly. That brings on automaticity. The
Hmm.
automaticity brings on accuracy, and the accuracy is one of the strands of fluency.
And then
Really important.
comprehension.
And then comprehension, that
Yeah,
brings comprehension, because once you release the
right.
brain, once you release the working memory from trying to figure out what the word is, or what the sound correspondence spelling is, once it becomes automatic, you can start thinking about what the word actually means, or the phrase, or the sentence, or the paragraph. So
Yes.
yeah. So
Excellent.
how do decodable books support phonics? One of the first things that occurred to me was that it actually gives a purpose for phonics, because phonics itself is quite abstract. It's quite difficult to hear sounds in words. And anyway, why would you want to do that? I mean, why would you say k, at? What is the purpose of these exercises? What is the purpose of the segmenting, of the phonemic awareness, of the blending, of all the stuff we do around our teaching? And fundamentally, once the children start to read, it gives them a purpose. They are basically learning phonics for a fun experience of being able to read a book themselves. So that's a great thing
Yes.
about a decodable book. The other thing, as we've already mentioned, it provides the practice, and we know that we need to practice and practice and practice until we get good at things, in the same way that we have to do that when we ride a bike.
Hmm.
The other thing is it encourages blending and not guessing, because you can only
Yes.
work out the words by blending the sounds together. In
Correct.
a good decodable book, you won't be able to guess what the word is
Right.
from the picture. And that's
Yes.
very important.
That is so important. Yes. We want our readers to be blending, not guessing, for sure.
Exactly. The other thing, it develops trust in what you're teaching them. Because if you are teaching them something that works in a book and they can read it, then they'll go with you all along the way. If you're teaching them something but giving them something that doesn't work when they try and use it, there's a kind of mismatch. They're not going to
Mm,
use something that you've taught them if it doesn't work when you're giving them a text which is not decodable. So the wonderful thing about Decodable is actually supports you as you teach your phonics, because it allows the children to prove to themselves that what they're doing actually works, because they are succeeding. So
And
it
Tammy,
develops.
when the struggling readers that I've worked with over the years, building that trusting relationship and that purpose for reading is so, so critical. And when they see and feel that success with these types of books, that just deepens the trusting relationship, I think, with whoever is working with them.
Particularly with kids who've already failed, because they feel that teachers have tried this, teachers have tried that,
Right.
nothing has changed how they feel about reading.
Yep.
So if your teaching is solid and structured, and then you give them something which is they can decode independently and successfully, you are bringing a completely new message to them about what they can do in reading.
Yes. And feeling that success is so, so important. And it's emotionally sound for the child. It's a win-win.
Absolutely. So again, success is very, very, very important, because success develops motivation.
Hmm.
And motivation is
Absolutely.
a very important part in learning. I'm sure that in the future they'll find a kind of motivation chemical that switches on kids or switches off kids, because the kids who are not motivated to read are not going to do as well, because they're not going to try and they're not going to succeed, and it's a kind of vicious circle. So
Hmm.
the success is very important, particularly in the beginning when you're trying to turn a child around, for them to see that
So
what you are
important.
teaching them works within reading, within a fun book that they can read. Of course, and also independence. The whole notion that a lot of these kids have become very dependent and passive. They
Yes.
come to a word and they don't know what to do. because they can't guess it. They don't know what it is. They don't have the toolkit how to tackle it. So if you are teaching in a structured literacy way, and you have decodable books which are very structured, and you know that you've taught what the kid needs in order to succeed, you're going to change their attitude towards what they see they can do themselves without getting help. So that's also
Absolutely.
a good point. And the other thing, of course, is that we talked about was they help to develop reading accuracy, because children no longer expect to just get any old word or guess a word or try and figure it out from the meaning or the sentence or the grammar. They actually have to work out the word itself, and that accuracy develops what we said, automaticity, and then of course the fluency, and then the comprehension. It's a kind of straight one development from another.
Yeah,
So,
and really working towards accuracy, not just some approximation.
exactly. Yeah. So very, very important to know that the decodable books come after phonics teaching. They are not separate from it. Even if you're not using exactly the same progression as your program, which is okay, you need to make sure that whatever the phonic sequence or scope within the book has been covered already, because what we don't want is surprises or things that the kids haven't learned, and therefore the first thing they will resort to is guessing.
Right. Absolutely. And I know that many trained Orton-Gillingham practitioners, teachers, tutors, really hold fast to whatever progression they've been given in their training, even me included sometimes. But I think that we do have to be mindful of where each individual child is or a particular group of students is, and that there is a little bit of flexibility in there. You don't have to feel so locked in, but we have to keep in mind there are certain skills that the child needs to have been taught prior.
That's right. I must say that sometimes with some of my students, I use them to develop fluency. So I know that they've actually covered that part of the code already. So it's not actually matching the exact lessons I'm teaching.
Right.
I know that they've covered it already, and that's a great way just to develop fluency. I'll show you in a minute how the story is very exciting, they're fun, and it's a great way for the kids to build their confidence, even if it's not exactly at where I'm teaching them. Even if we've gone beyond that point from the point of view of the teaching content of my lessons. So just to let you know, you probably all know this, because one of the things I didn't mention when I started is that when I was teaching at the center, as I'm sure all of you do, I started to write my own decodable stories, because that's what you do when you're teaching. You're teaching a certain spelling or a certain vowel team, and then you think on your feet, and you write a little sentence, you get the kids to read that sentence, that decodable sentence to you, or even to make their own. And that's really how we started, because well, if we're doing this every lesson anyway, why don't we publish the stories that we've written with the phonics in them? So for everybody, I just wanted to say that actually all our books really start with a word list, because the word list is what it is about. The word list is the phonic content. It's the scope and then eventually the sequence of what we want this child to be able to do. So fundamentally, the word list is embedded, or the words we choose from the word list is embedded in the text, and it helps to consolidate the letter correspondence we're working on.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
As we said, kids always need to have worked on those letter sound correspondences before reading the book. So let me give you an example of our very, very, very first book. And that is, I'm just going to show you 3 levels.
Right.
So on the left, this is our Dandelion Launchers series. And unlike other series that might, for example, teach just, the first books might be short vowel a, right? Short vowel a. Those books, the kids might need to know the whole alphabet. So the focus of the book is the a, but they're going to need lots and lots of letters to go with the short vowel. In this book, all the kids need is 5 sounds of the alphabet. So it's taking up a much smaller part of the phonic code, so the kids can blend, segment, practice phonemic awareness, and then they can succeed reading a book. So that is, for example, of our very, very first book in our Dandelion Launches series. Further on, this is from our That Dog series. It's for older struggling readers, and you can see, for example, following a lesson when you taught the CK spelling, the consonant digraph CK, you'd see how lots of CK words are embedded in the text.
Yes.
And further on from our Alba series, this is after you've taught a number of ways to spell the sound O, OA, OW, split O, split E, and O. This is a text that would have different ways of spelling O in it. And that you see how these words are embedded in the text.
Yes, so we have multiple exposures.
Yeah. So if you look at a decodable series, what questions should you be asking about their quality? What should they have? So first of all, most of the words should be decodable at a specific level that you're working on. And I say this simply because a lot of books are called decodable, but actually they're not. You open them up and you can see there are lots of vowel teams when they're actually only working on CVC words. So there are lots of challenges for children shouldn't be there. They shouldn't be having to guess words that they can't decode yet if they're at the very beginning. So number one is it needs to be decodable, or mostly. You probably have a word here or there that you need for the story, but they need mostly to have decodable words.
Yeah, and that's so important. You know, people see what looks like and what's even marketed as phonics readers, maybe in the bookstore or online, and they get them and are incredibly disappointed because they are not really controlled at all.
Exactly.
And it's kind of questionable as to why they might be called phonics readers.
Well, I think I think the people who wrote them probably don't really understand structured literacy, because anybody who does understand structured literacy understands that there's a sequence to the complexity. So you don't put vowel teams in next to CVC words, because that's a few lessons down the line. If you see what I mean. Stair-step progression, really, really important to have step-by-step progression, very clear. You know what you need to teach, you know what you need, the phonemic awareness you need to practice, and the kids succeed at every step. Clear phonic focus, it's really in every book. So basically, if you pick up a book and you look at the back or look at the front, wherever, you can see immediately what that book is teaching, and not try and figure out, not be unclear about what exactly is the focus of this book. Really important to have engaging stories and illustrations. A lot of criticism brought about decodable books is that they're nonsensical. They don't make any sense. And I think we've moved forward from that stage and tried as best as we can to give a twist or a funny story or something entertaining and engaging, so it's not a kind of nonsensical a sentence that doesn't really bear any meaning. The text has to encourage decoding and not guessing. This is one of the purposes of this text, decoding. So the words have to be decodable, and otherwise it's not doing its job. A text that's not repetitive. So one of the things that you can tell a difference between a I don't think it's balanced reader, but the first book that often kids get when they read, they might have a picture of a fireman, and the sentence will be, "My dad is a fireman," and the next picture there'll be a woman who's dressed as a doctor, "My mum is a doctor," and they can read a whole book without reading one word, simply because the illustrations give them the text, that give them the nouns they need, and the text is repetitive. So we try and avoid repetitive text. That means the kids actually have to decode the text.
I think that's really important, because we see a lot of those predictive text books out there for children that, like, very, very early on when we're teaching maybe concepts of print and how a book works, and but that is not a book for working on true decoding, because the child could just look at the picture and figure out what it's going to say, and notice that there's a pattern as the book goes on. And with true decodable books, yes, there might be some, and as your books have, they may have beautiful illustrations, but the child is really going to have to concentrate on looking at the text, not rely on picture guessing.
That's right. And the other thing that we very much like to have, especially in the beginning stages, is cumulative progression at the early stages. And that's because, particularly when they're learning the very, very basics, we need to include what they learned before in every lesson. Otherwise, they forget. When
Right.
when I started teaching, before I did my structured literacy, I was teaching with English language learners, and one day I'd come and I teach them ABC, and the next day I'd come and I do DEF, and they'd forgotten ABC by the time we got to the letter F, because
Right.
I didn't understand that in order to commit things to commit learning to long-term memory, you need to revisit it and you need to
Right.
use it. And so
Yep.
cumulative progression is very
Absolutely.
important.
Yes. And that's once again going to be confidence building, as you were mentioning earlier. So important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, for those children who are real strugglers, it's really important to have additional resources, whether it's workbooks or online activities and games, because they just need that extra bit of practice. They're still going through the same paces, but they just need more practice.
Yep.
So that's what I would be looking for in a quality series of decodable books. So here's an example of the cumulative progression in our very, very first read. As you can see that Dandelion launches stage 1 to 7, introduces the sounds of the alphabet. And so the first stage is the letters S-A-T-I-M. And that the second stage will add the letters N-O-P. But you can see in the text itself, it'll still have some of the letters from the previous book, from
Hmm.
the previous stage. And then in stage 3, it adds 4 more letters, B, C, G, H, but it'll have letters and sounds from the previous 2 books. And this is
Yeah.
really, really important in the beginning stages, till you
Yeah.
just create your solid foundation of phonics before you move on. So this is the example of
Absolutely.
cumulative progression in our books. And this is the Dandelion Launcher series for very beginner young readers.
Okay.
Moving on to show the progression. So you have our Dandelion launches stages 8 to 10. Stage 8 will be words with C, V, C, C. And you can see words like mend, tent, hank in the text. Stage 9 will be C, C, V, C, words like Fred and trip and spill. But also they have the word milk, which comes from the previous stage. And
Right.
then in stage 10, you have CCVCC, which is really tricky, the word like sprint. But you
Yeah.
also have simpler words like pants, and of course your CVC words often there too, Ken and Bob, just to reinforce what has come before. So that's the example of our Dandelion Launcher series for very young readers.
So yeah, they really are making sure that you're spiraling back and
Exactly, exactly.
revisiting. Absolutely.
Yeah. Moving on with the Dandelion launches to the consonant digraphs, we have the same. Stage 11 includes CH, stage
Okay.
12 SH, and you can see in the text that each one has got those words in it. So for example, if you look at the middle, you've got the words shep and wish, both SH at the beginning of the word, but also at the end of the word. And there's no way that the reader could guess from the picture what the text would be.
You're right.
And stage 13 is TH, and on it goes to cover the consonant digraphs. And that is our Dandelion launches stages 11 to 15.
Okay.
Now, at the moment, we haven't got everything we need for the vowel teams, but we have our first series, and that's our Dandelion Readers Level 1 vowel spellings. And that introduces just one spelling, one vowel team for a book. It
Okay.
hasn't got different ways to spell a sound like I'll show you later on. At the moment, we've just got a series with one. So Level 1, book 1 will be the spelling AI, the vowel team AI, and you can see in the words rains and whale and wait. You can also notice that sometimes, because some of the words are quite quirky, because we're working on the decoding new words, that the word whale, for example, is an interesting word to teach. It's not the whale in the sea, it's the whale that you cry. So it's an opportunity to develop new vocabulary too.
Yes.
And then
I
you
know
have,
when we get into those vowel teams, that's a prime opportunity to start teaching those homophones, right?
exactly, yes. So we need to keep, so book 2 is the EE spelling, and book 3 is OA spelling. So you can see how this goes. This is a new series, and we are rolling out more books with more alternative spellings for young readers. That probably happen next year. One of our strengths is the fact we also have a range of readers for older struggling readers. If you remember, I told you about how many children actually, that's the center I was teaching, actually came at the age of 8 and 9 and 10, and they didn't really want to read those dandelion launchers and dandelion readers. They wanted something which was more engaging. So let's just have a look at what those books need to include for our older struggling readers. So again, they have to be decodable. If they are sold as decodable, they should be decodable. The text should be able, you should be able to decode it by using your blending skills. Very important to make them age appropriate. Many kids suffer from low self-esteem, and they already switched off from reading, and we want to make something engaging, but also something that makes them feel grown up and not babyish.
Right.
What we want to do is really to engage and motivate our disaffected learners. So we've actually looked for very particularly engaging and kind of motivating, exciting stories, action-packed, to make our readers want to read. Again, even a series for older struggling readers has to be stair-step progression, because you have to fill in the missing phonic gaps, because a lot of them have very patchy knowledge of the phonic code. That may be because they missed school, it may be because they weren't listening, it may be because everything happened too fast and they didn't have enough practice.
Right.
But you need to go through the same stair-step progression.
Okay.
Clear scope and see. Very important for the teacher to know what is in this book. What do I need to teach to make this a success? And again, the practice and consolidation. So this is an example of taking very, very simple stories, which are basically kindergarten level text, CVC level text, but making it looking cooler. And you can see this is our Moondog set 1, and you can see the scope, the progression is exactly the same as we showed you for the little for the dandelion launchers, exactly the same for kindergarten books, because fundamentally there's no difference. They need to go through the same paces.
Exactly.
But it looks a bit cooler, right?
Yeah, it does.
Like and of course, again, we have cumulative progression in these readers too.
Yes.
You can see how fun these look, but you can see the text is really basic. It's like kindergarten level text, CVC level text. And we have quite a diverse number of characters, both races and disability, which we like, which is fun. And just give you an example of the kind of, and we're talking really about real beginners here. We're talking about kids who are covering very, very basic code, the consonant digraphs in this case. And we always include games in our beginner readers, because it's a great way to practice. They're inside the inside cover of the book, and it helps the teacher, parent, teaching assistant to have an immediate fun thing to do when you conclude reading. So that is in our Dandelion launcher book, but also in our Moondog set 1, and I think all the way to set 3. Moving on to vowel teams. This is now Moondog set 3, and you can see how this time, because it's for struggling readers, we have only 2 alternative vowel teams for the sound A. So for kids who struggle, who are very daunted by many alternatives, I might start with this and then introduce a book with more alternatives.
Mhm.
So this is our Moondog Set 3, and it's got 2 alternatives for every vowel sound. And here you can see the scope and sequence.
Oh,
2
good.
alternative for every in every book. Here's an
Great.
example of a text for the sound A in it. So you will find words with AY and words with AI. Here's an
I
example.
love the illustrations.
And the illustrations are fun. This is
Yeah.
about a dog that's basically abandoned and at the vet. So it's a real fun story. The characters look age appropriate. They're cool. But also you can see inside the text, you'll have EA words and EE words embedded, because the focus of the
Yes.
book is to get that practice going.
Mm-hmm.
Here's an example of O, and I reckon that picture actually is from Amsterdam.
I was just going to say that. Yeah,
like
the architecture and the water, and yeah.
Yeah. So you can see this is O, and you're going to have OW words and OA words in this text. Next, I want to talk about our series, which are slightly different because we have a whole range of series where the reader starts from book 1 and goes all the way to book 12, and he only finds out what happens in the end by the time he or she gets to book 12. This is a great way to hook the readers because suddenly they want to know what happens next.
Right.
That dog series. And we have 2 series. One is a fantasy called the Magic Belt, and the other is called That Dog. And they both are now parallel. Now, these parallel series are a huge help to teachers because that means that you can get double the practice. They follow the same scope and sequence, right? And that means that you can have one in the lesson, one for homework, or you can stretch the lesson over 2 weeks as in just want to go over it again. Mm-hmm. So it gives you more to work with for those struggling readers. The other thing that's really cool is that you can actually ask the child which they prefer. And this gives them a bit of empowerment. If they prefer fantasy, they'll go with Magic Belt. If they like dogs, they can go with That Dog. So that already gives them a little bit more kind of sense of control over their own reading and control over their choices that they're making.
Yes, and having choice is hugely important, especially for our reluctant readers. And kids love the confidence building of reading a series. They love to engage with the same character and find out what's going to happen next. And so I think that's really, really a nice way to hook in those kids that need these.
I think often sometimes with phonics particularly, authors like to use the names of the characters for the spelling. So one book is Ned because you're doing short vowel E, and the next book is Pip because you're doing short vowel E. So you know the characters never return because you've moved on to teaching some other phonics. But with us, we have characters that return, the kids get quite attached to.
Oh, great.
So this is, for example, the scope and sequence of both the series, both Magic Belt and That Dog. And it shows you how you start from CVC and continue through the consonant digraphs and introducing also some suffixes towards the end of the series. Now, when I was talking about using these series for reading fluency, this is the kind of series I might use for reading fluency. I'm teaching somebody vowel teams, but they're still very, very laborious in their decoding. I might give them this series, which is not about vowel teams. It's about just decoding to practice and gain confidence and become fluent in the easier texts in this series. So that's a kind of example I might use. This is what you can see inside the text. I did want to mention that these are chapter books. Yes. So it's another great advantage, a great kind of feature that kids like when they want to feel that they're grown up. They're not reading babish books. Now their books have chapters. Even though the chapters could be only a few pages long, this is another feature that we wanted to include.
I love that it's 2 totally different genres.
Yes, yes. You can see that the Magic Belt is a little bit less text on it.
Mhm.
than that dog. But that's in a way one of the things you could use to your advantage as a teacher. You could start off with a magic belt and then give them another book, same reading level, but more reading stamina.
Mhm.
Here's another example of the two. Very exciting quest on one and then completely chaotic dog on the other. I think anybody who's given a dog a bath recognizes that scene.
Yes.
And we're moving on to our next series now, which is both two parallel series, Totem and Alba, again, fantasy, and another kind of action-filled series with a heroine this time. And we're very proud that we have two series with girl heroines, with girl leading characters. And
Yes.
interestingly enough, we often have boys who like this too, because it's all about a little person struggling in a huge world. And Alba, the character in the Alba series, has been shrunk by a shrink ray, and she has to get
Okay.
very, very important to her father. But she has to brave the city, go through the city, but she's tiny. So that's exciting.
Yeah.
The Totem and the Alba series are slightly different to the Magic Belt and that dog because the progression is faster.
Okay.
These series are aimed for kids who have actually done consonant digraphs, but they've kind of a little bit patchy.
Okay.
So the progression is much faster. So you'd want to use these for kids. If, for example, you started with vowel teams, but you want them to get their reading fluency up, you might want to use this as you are teaching the vowel teams.
Okay.
Here we have even three series: Talisman, Rescue, and Adventure, the Island Adventure series. Talisman is, again, a fantasy series, the same character, Zach. Here, the rescue is with our girl character, Erin. And our newest is Island Adventure. That's got a kind of slight ecological theme to it. It's very beautifully illustrated.
Yes.
All these three series are series that introduce alternative spelling for vowels.
Okay.
So that credit, you have to do the teaching before they read this. Another important thing is we really think vocabulary is something that we can teach along the way.
Mhm.
As we introduce sometimes quite quirky words, but sometimes just good words. I mean, many kids won't know what exclaim means or mock, or even won't exactly know what the word gaze means. And it's a really good opportunity. And one of the best ways to teach vocabulary is within a text that's engaging and meaningful to the children. So we always have vocabulary pages inside the book.
Okay.
We also have a reading practice page. So
Okay.
if you open any of these books, you will be able to see exactly what the spellings, the vowel teams you need to have taught before they read this book.
Yes.
And
Okay.
this is really, really helpful for both teachers and parents. And this is at the front of the book. Before they start reading, you can practice this and make sure the kids know how to read all these words.
Okay.
Here I'm looking at Talisman 1, and you can see the text now. This is A. Both of them have words with different ways of spelling A. And now we've got 5 different ways of spelling A, or maybe a bit more, 6. This is an example of spellings of E. If you look carefully, you'll have EE, EA. You might even have just E in it in both the text. And on the right, it's O. You can have rainbow and shoal and floated and followed and yellow, and quite a few examples close. A lot of words with the spellings O in it. You can see been embedded in the text.
Yep. This is a really nice opportunity to build vocabulary. Definitely, I can see.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we don't think that decodable texts need to dumb down.
No.
It doesn't necessarily. We can enrich the language
Mhm.
as the kids are learning to read. Here, for example, is I love this picture of the huge rabbit and the tiny erin. You can see words like fur and lurched, sturdy, roller and coaster, all have
Mhm.
spellings in the girl. So another example of how the words are embedded in text. And on the right, you have I. You can see that lovely turtle there. There's a lot of turtle conservation theme in the series. That's one of the lovely things about this series.
Okay.
Moving on, Titan Gauntlets, you can see more text now. This is trickier content now. You've got really quite demanding words like futile and dislodged. Okay, this book exactly focuses on the spelling U. That's why the word futile is in it, and using, and I'm just looking at stupid, all have spellings of U in it. But
Yes.
as you go along, you can also see the vocabulary is getting richer and the reading is getting longer. And here's another series, Talisman 2, also U. I think this is U too, yeah. So you'll have words like furious and words like fused, which are there for a reason because you're teaching the spelling U.
Okay.
And now we come to the last series of all, and that's Amber Guardians, which aims to bridge the gap between these decodable texts and actually paperback books, which are age appropriate, because kids can get a little bit stuck on reading a limited amount of text and they kind of too scared. So what we've done is we've interspersed the illustrations here and there, and occasionally there's a full page of text. And that is Amber Guardians, our last series. This moves away from phonics now and more focuses on morphology, our last series.
Okay. Yes, that's an excellent progression to work your way up to.
Beyond phonics. Yeah.
Yes.
And also to create more text so the kids don't get stuck on just a little amount of text. Okay. Now, our workbooks are particularly useful for struggling readers, and each workbook has got a chapter for every book in the series. So that dog has got 12 chapters because it's got 12 books in it. And within each chapter, the activities are divided into those activities that come before reading the book and activities that come after. So word building, playing with sound, which is spelling manipulation, reading and spelling, caption reading and spelling. This is all part of your phonics teaching. You might even have it from your own program if you don't use it from the workbook. And after reading the book, you're going to be able to do all the comprehension activities. If you're in the Vowel teams, you also have a lot of reading and sorting activities within the workbook. And I'll show you an example in a minute. So this is, for example, all the kind of phonics stuff that you might get from your own program, OG, or whatever you're using, whether it's Wilson. And you've got reading and spelling together. You've got spelling manipulation, caption reading and spelling. And then you come to the stage when you want to do a lot of comprehension activities. And that's when you get your fluency by revisiting the text again and again. So here are some of the activities. This is a comprehension activity. On purpose, we've made it very easy to do and does not entail sentence writing. Often kids who are doing comprehension activities get just totally caught up in their handwriting, in their spelling, in their punctuation, and they forget about the fact that this is actually a comprehension activity. So kids really like to do it because it's very straightforward. Vocabulary work, this is matching parts of the sentences. Then you have punctuation, which actually goes together with comprehension, because you can't know where to put a full stop unless you know where the sentence ends, unless you comprehend the sentence. So this is a lovely activity which slowly builds up comprehension skills and punctuation. And we have reading fluency too. This is an example of reading fluency. Usually I'll ask my student to read it first, just read it throughout, and second, to read it with expression, because you want them to revisit the text again and again and again. And of course, we have a game in each chapter too. This is a fun kind of snakes and ladders with the characters in the game. Just one mention for when COVID lifts, and today we had very good news that there might be a vaccine coming soon. Yes. We're very excited to hear that. Yeah. Just wanted to say that we have card games. So when we go back to one-to-one teaching, these are very, very, or face-to-face teaching, these are very exciting and motivating card games that we have.
Kids love those.
Oh, you
all right. And Tami, thank you so much. You have gone truly above and beyond to not only provide a solid background as to the why we use decodable books with our children, but given just beautiful examples of these books. And I just am so excited. Why don't you give us a little information about what you're providing my audience?
Well, we thought that this is a good opportunity to offer your community a 10% discount. And
Excellent.
we've decided to make it go on until the end of the year, until the 31st of December. So there's plenty of time to think about it. But you will need a code. So if you
Yes.
go onto our website, www.phonicbooks.com, and put in the code Autumn LN, which is Autumn Literacy Nest 10%, you will be able to get your 10% off any of the resources that we've mentioned. So any books, any workbooks, even the card games that we have, you will be able to get 10% off.
Excellent.
So,
Well, thank you. That is a wonderful incentive, and you all have plenty of time to think about it. And who knows, with the holidays coming, maybe we have some very, very generous school administrators who love to take advantage of that for you, for your classrooms or for your tutoring facilities. And we certainly would love for you to take advantage of that. And so once again, the code is Autumn LN, all caps, 10%, and that is until December 31st, 2020. We hope you'll take advantage of that. Tami, thank you so much. And I look forward to continuing our relationship. It's been so fun speaking with you these past few
it
months
has,
this
Emily,
fall.
it has indeed.
And
So much in
yeah,
common.
yeah, I know. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching this today. And we'll see you soon. All right, we'll be signing off now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. And